Hello again. Jared Case, curator of film exhibitions at the George Eastman Museum and the Dryden Theater, here with another daily streaming recommendation. Most of the recommendations you'll find here are films that we screened at the Dryden recently, or fairly recently. And the last time we showed this film was in 2015, in a series dedicated to the first director of the motion picture department, James Card. It was his centennial year in 2015, and he is important to the department and to the museum, not just because his films, his own personal collection, form the basis of the collection that still exists at the museum, but also he affected the way that we collected film and what we considered to be important enough to collect. So in this series, we highlighted some of the mirth and merriment that James Card brought along the way since the Dryden Theater opened in 1951. The film today is His Girl Friday from 1940, directed by Howard Hawks with Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell. It is, of course, the gender-swapped version of the play The Front Page by Ben Hecht and Charles MacArthur, which was first produced on stage in 1928 and first turned into a film in 1931, directed by Louis Milestone and starring Adolphe Menjou and Pat O'Brien, which firmly sits it directly in the screwball comedy mode in 1940. So in the film, Russell plays reporter Hildy Johnson, ex-wife of her editor, Walter Burns, played by Grant. Though there seems to be genuine affection, the two still fight and insult each other, particularly when Hildy shows up after a 4-month vacation engaged to Ralph Bellamy. In the midst of a story about presumably innocent man being hung the next day, Walter must do everything he can to get both the story and get Hildy back before she runs off to get married. And as I said, this fits squarely in the subgenre of screwball comedy, which presents itself as a spoof of romance in opposition to the straightforward romantic type of film and the arc that you would see within those. The protagonists are often outwardly antagonistic to each other, sparring in a battle of witty repartee, and always saying that they want to be away from each other, but somehow finding themselves back together, or producing the situations that bring them back together in the end. This film in particular is known for its overlapping dialogue, which was frowned upon on screen at the time for confusing the audience, but which naturally produced a more realistic tone. You can find accounts that claim that the average rate of dialogue for a film is about 90 words per minute, or that normal conversation is about 120 words per minute, but by at least one count, this film offers 240 words per minute, certainly fast-paced, witty repartee. Now, whether it's the performances or the writing, this film is remembered and cherished now 80 years later and considered one of the best American comedies ever. Couple of extra notes here. This was actually the third film in a row that Howard Hawks made with Cary Grant, following up on Bringing Up Baby in 1938 and Only Angels Have Wings in 1939. And as much as we recognize Cary Grant and his star power today, it was actually Rosalind Russell who, at the time, garnered more Oscar nominations. She ended up having 4 to Grant's only 2. Rosalind Russell was nominated for, and these were all after this film came out, their star was still sort of rising, My Sister Eileen in 1942, Sister Kenny in 1946, Morning Becomes Electra in 1947, and then about a decade later, she did have that wonderful turn as Auntie Mame in 1958. Grant's 2 nominations came in Penny Serenade the year following this, in 1941, and None But the Lonely Heart in 1944. So normally when you are seeing something at the Dryden, we'd end up this introduction with a nod to The Projectionist. But you know what? You're the projectionist now. So go ahead, start up that film, give yourself a hand, and we'll see you again later.